for the most part, throughout the ages, almost all art, I won't say all, but almost all art was of a religious nature or for something of a religious purpose. Now, there's a lot of very old sculpture, particularly the Greek sculpture, that is excellent, beautiful work. Like, say, the discus thrower. Everybody knows that one. That is not necessarily an explicitly religious work, but it is beautiful, and it portrays something, and it does elevate you, take you out of yourself into something else, which is, so the whole point behind it is that it is a peak masculine form. It is an ideal masculine form, which is something to strive to. Something for men to strive to. A lot of the feminine statues of back then were also of what they considered to be a perfect female form, something for women to strive to. And that's what they chose to depict in most of their art. Occasionally, there were also stories of deities told, or like a specific statue that tells, or is a scene from a story of a specific deity. This is Greek sculpture that I'm referencing here specifically. But basically, because that's something that all the people would have already known, it's a story everybody would have known, so they can look at that and go, oh yeah, I know what that is. So then we get into the Middle Ages, and again, art winds up being of pretty much an entirely religious nature. The most beautiful thing to come out of the Middle Ages are the churches. We have churches from the Middle Ages and a few castles, and we have basically no other buildings at all.
So clearly the ones that the most care was put into, which reflects the heart of the people, which is what art does anyway. So
correct. Now, a lot of talk about the history of art would talk about style and technique and different types of art, but I'm not really going to do that. That is for a specific art history class. I'm going to try to keep this more about the soul and the idea behind the art. And the reason that men painted beautiful imagery was because men wanted to see beautiful things. And the reason that some of the most beautiful imagery we have is of a religious nature is because when you are making something to honor God, you do it to the best of your ability, the best way you know how.
Yeah, because if art is something that calls you up out of yourself to something greater, that explains the ancient Greek statues like you were talking about, both the discus thrower and the feminine statues. You see the height of what you could be. Even if you're not going to become a discus thrower, you see someone who has reached the pinnacle of something that they're doing. And not just the pinnacle, but you, in a sense, see the journey leading up to it. For all of those cases you mentioned. And if God exists, and you are to know, love, and serve him in this world, then it is the greatest thing you can do to glorify him. Which is why that art form would be so great, of building a cathedral, of building a church.
All right, you're building his house. And you're making his house as beautiful as you can possibly make. Now, the different architectural styles of the time are influenced kind of by the culture of the time. But as art progresses, it gets more detailed and kind of more specialized. So by the time we get to the Renaissance, we probably have some of the most detailed painting and sculpture that we have ever had in history. Now, the sculpture is probably only slightly more detailed than what the Greeks did, as far as carving out of marble. But the knowledge of the human body that the artist had is so clearly reflected. If you look at one of Michelangelo's sculptures, either his David or his Moses, or one of Bernini's. Just a level of detail, like you can see tendons clearly in the flesh. You can see the tension built up in the muscle. It's like somebody took a picture of somebody in the process of doing something. And again, those pieces are of a religious nature. They're caused to meditate on something. And for religious purposes. The David was done as a crowning piece for the cupola of the Basilica in Florence.
Okay.
The
Is that Il
Moses,
Duomo, that basilica, or is that a different cathedral?
that's a different one. Il Duomo is in Rome.
Okay.
I think. I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong. The Moses is in a little church in Rome called San Pietro in Carcere. It's St. Peter in chains. And it's by somebody's tomb. I don't remember if it's Pope or a cardinal. But it also is just incredibly detailed. The pose that he's in, you can see the tendons in his arm, every single muscle in his arm. It's incredible. Not an ounce of fat on the body of the man. And when you're doing this, particularly if you're portraying a saint, the glorified body has no flaws whatsoever. So you are, of course, portraying a glorified ideal body because it's Moses and David. So that's one of the things that made Renaissance art so great.